In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do.
Record to this computer. Okay, we are recording. We are live. It is a rainy Sunday in Austin. It is a sunny Thursday in Palm Springs. Taylor, how you doing today?
It's not Thursday.
Right. Time zones do not change the days of the week. Is that correct?
Not by like 4 days.
See,
No, it is sunny, but it is very windy. My husband and his dad just went to Home Depot to get some boards because we're like building this big shed in the backyard that's like 12 feet tall, and it is not done, and it is not standing up straight.
Y'all are doing this yourself?
No, we have a contractor, but he's a maniac, so he's like hasn't been here in like a month. And he is essentially he's allegedly on his way, but he's a crazy person, so who knows?
Taylor,
contractor is a loose term. Everything.
It's a guy who for some reason always has like chickens and chicken wired fence in his truck, back of his truck. But I will say that a secret skill of mine is I am a master concrete pourer. So
really,
if y'all need to just knock this thing down and pour a new foundation, all I ask is that you pay for my plane ticket, book me in a 4-star hotel.
We don't have any. Okay.
For a weekend, and offer me a $200 per diem, and I'll be there, and I'll pour the concrete for you. Let
me consider that. A generous offer of yours.
Yep. Run it by Juan. Let me know what you think.
Thank you.
So we are. We're doomed to fail. Intro. This is Welcome to Doomed to Fail. I'm Fars, joined here by Taylor. We are covering 2 stories, one historic, one true crime that has to do with 2 things that came together that were doomed to fail, or anything else actually at all, because we have no premise that is consistent within this show's theme.
I love it. Great.
Good. Nailed it.
Perfect.
And today, per usual, we are going to split this episode up, and Taylor's going to go first. And Taylor, give me a hint of what you're going to cover. I want to play a game.
You want to play a game?
Yes. You're going to hint at what you're going to cover, and I'm going to do my guesses.
Oh, sure. I am covering something that is mainly one person who is very, very famous, who has a very, very, very big movie coming out on Wednesday. You can't see my face. We turn off our cameras, but I'm wondering, are you making a contemplative face? Okay, you are. Good. Thank you.
Okay, so the very, very famous. Okay, very, very famous.
My drink, my themed drink is champagne, but not like Prosecco, like champagne because it has to come from France.
Okay, so we're dealing with a very famous French person.
Oui.
Okay,
it's a he. He is
a
general.
Napoleon!
Turned emperor. Yes.
Fucking nailed it. That was so easy.
Yes. I was like doing something else, and then I was like, holy shit, when does Napoleon the movie come out? And then I was like, holy shit, it comes out on November 22nd. So I got to ride this bandwagon, and I shifted, and I learned a shit ton about Napoleon in the past 4 days.
That sounds like a lot to do in 4 days.
It is, and I definitely don't know everything. And I have yelled Avec, waterslide 1,000 times at my family this week. Do you remember that from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
Definitely not.
They go Bill and Ted's. You saw that, right? From the 90s. What? Okay. So Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, they go back in time and meet a bunch of famous people like Socrates and Abraham Lincoln, and they call Socrates Socrates. It's the best. But they meet Napoleon, and Napoleon comes back to the 80s in California, and they have a water park called Waterloo, and he like loves it, and it's like there's a scene of him like in his hat, like just going down these water slides and just having a great time. And then he goes back in time to his time period, and he is like showing people a battlefield, and he's like Avec waterslide, which means with water slides because he loves water slides now. It's
That's
hilarious.
fun.
Yeah, super fun. So yeah, so let's talk about Napoleon. How much do you know about Napoleon?
I know we named a complex after him. I
Indeed.
know that he really didn't like America.
Yeah, sure.
Isn't he the general that fought us? Or
No.
fought No, he's the one who supported us against the English.
That was a little bit before him, but let's get into it.
Yeah, are you done asking me
So
questions?
I am.
It's
So
funny, you guys aren't gonna get anything.
in the past 4 days, I read a book called Napoleon by J. Christopher Herold, and I watched a 4-part documentary on PBS about Napoleon. It's from like the early, I don't know, it's from like the 90s. It's terrible. It's like just like really poorly produced, but like has a lot of information. So there's that. And then also there's a Dan Carlin I'm going to reference later because I have some interesting things to discuss with you about Napoleon.
Sweet.
I'll put that in there. We could, if we were really talking about our premise, say we're doing Napoleon and Josephine, since they're one of the like doomed to fail couples that comes up when you Google that. So we will talk about them a little bit. But a couple things just to tell you about Napoleon before we get started. He obviously there were tons of wars in Europe because of Napoleon. The total deaths from the Napoleonic Wars, which is not even, it's like 2 decades of war, ran for people who were like in the army and in the different armies of the different countries that he was fighting. 2.5 to 3.5 million people died. And then civilian deaths were anywhere from, 1 million to 3 million as well. So a shit ton of people died because of Napoleon. Yeah.
Right.
Another thing about him is he was not French. He was born in Corsica, which is not France. I'll tell you what that means later. Yeah, it is now, but it's like kind of an independent island. I'll tell you about it in a second. And then the last thing is about his shortness. So some parts of the internet tell me he was 5'2". Some parts of the internet tell me when he died he was 5'7", which I like don't believe. And they also tell me the average Frenchman was 5'4", which seems wild. And I didn't look this up, like how tall French guys are now, but like George Washington has a very similar timeline as Napoleon. He's a little bit older, but he was 6'2", so like it's a huge difference.
But I would guess that being Americans, like we give top billing to people, It's like the wrestling thing where it's like, Stone Cold Steve Austin is 6'9" and 430 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, no, he's actually like 220 and like 6. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was one of those things.
That's fair. So my father-in-law was talking about it, but we were laughing about DeSantis' heels.
Oh my God, it was so cute. Because
we still do it.
Doesn't Trump say 6'4"?
Exactly. That man
He's like obviously not.
6'4". He's the shortest 6'4" person I've ever seen in my life. He's not 6'4".
He's got the same shoe manufacturer as DeSantis.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Yeah, so like, exactly that point. We're still trying to make ourselves taller.
Right.
No matter for like no reason. How tall are you?
I'm at least 6'1", but sometimes when I wear my boots, I'm like 6'3".
Nice. Your heels.
I'm gonna bring the boots to the wedding in North Carolina so that I'm like towering over everyone.
Nice. I love it.
Thank you.
So okay, so here we go. So this teeny tiny Corsican thought he was a Roman emperor, and he was power hungry. And I also wrote he was also water slide hungry. Anyway, if you get it, you'll get it. And I'm going to say it 100 times. And let's learn about him before we watch Joaquin Phoenix's world-changing performance starting Wednesday. So Napoleon was born in Corsica. Where is Corsica? What are you? It's an island, you're right. It's next to Italy. It's between France and Italy. So if you imagine the Italian boot, it kicks Sicily, then Sardinia, then Corsica. So Corsica is really kind of high up there between France and Italy, but it was its own like little thing when Napoleon was born. And there were about 120,000 shepherds living on Corsica, not really a warlike people, and France was kind of coming for them because it was a good strategic spot between, Italy and France. When Napoleon's mom was pregnant with him, the family had to like hide in the mountains of Corsica because the French were coming in and like attacking and taking over, which is kind of crazy. She did that while she was pregnant with him. And he was born on August 15th, 1769, Napoleone Bonaparte. And they called him un petit boy,
Those damn,
little.
those damn French.
Um, yeah. But they didn't speak French, they spoke Corsican, which is kind of like you said, a little bit Italian and French, but eventually, obviously, he speaks French. So France is now in charge of Corsica. He's living there with his family. He's a child, obviously. His mom had 8 kids. She was pregnant 16 times, but had 8 children, kind of lived to adulthood. And he loved his mom a lot. He was definitely a mama's boy, which is how you make either serial killers or presidents. That's it. There's
Mm,
no in between for a mama's boy, you know?
interesting.
And his dad was like, I fucking love this. I love the French. I'm in. So the French took over Corsica, and his dad was super into it. He loved it. He started wearing French clothes, speaking French. He was like, let's do it. Let's be French now. So he sent Napoleon at the age of 9 to France on a scholarship to a military school, which is very young to leave your family and go to a different country
Yeah,
where you don't speak the language, you know? And he was bored in military school, but he moved up pretty quickly. He was able to like do his work and all the things. And so he's around 20 during the revolution. Do you remember the revolution in Paris that we talked about? Who was in charge then and who died?
that was Henry VIII.
Nope, he's British. This was Marie Antoinette
Damn
and
it.
her
Yes.
and Louis the 16th.
Yep.
But close. We did talk about that too. But he was in Paris the day that he wasn't there, I don't think, when Marie Antoinette and King Louis were actually killed, but he was there the day there was that riot. I don't know if you remember where they cut off the Princess de Lamballe's head, who was Marie Antoinette's friend, and like ran around the city with her head on a stick and like left her naked body in the street to be like kicked. Do you remember that?
I mean, that had to be kind of fun if you're growing up in like just
It's
small
an
town
exciting
islands.
day.
Yeah, like if you're like a
Yeah.
little island kid, like that'd be a fun day.
hmm I wrote how fucking exciting. Super exciting to be there that day.
We're so gross.
Uh, so so he's in the middle of it. He's young, but the revolution is happening. Napoleon goes back to Corsica and he gets kicked out because they're trying to be independent again, and he was pretty much French now. They were like, like we don't really feel like you're Corsican anymore. We feel like you're French. So he said, you know what? It's better to eat than to starve. Better to choose a side that's going to win. So now he's French. And he went back to France and stayed there.
That
In
makes sense.
1793, his mom and his siblings, they're all banished from Corsica because he's French. So he has to take care of his family now. I think his dad might be dead by this point, or he's going to die soon. So he really has like all the siblings and his mom to take care of in France. So he needs to, get a job and do that. So he's in the army during the French Revolution. He sent to Toulon to fight the British. He won a bunch of things and started to get promoted and started to move up really fast, which is like weird because people were even at this time like he's a little weird. He's like kind of small, and in all the painting, there's so many paintings of him. When all the paintings of him from this time, he has like this weird long hair and these like weird bangs, kind of like a mullet, which is I don't know, maybe that
Was
was
that?
the style then, but everybody else around him seems to be wearing like powdered wigs.
I was gonna say that might have been the style.
Yeah, but I feel like it doesn't look like everybody else has that style, but I think it might be like a youthful style.
I mean, he definitely stood out in
But
history, so that makes sense.
yeah, totally. And maybe I mean, there's a bunch of paintings of him. Who knows who actually painted them or how far away they were from the thing that actually happened. But he does cut his hair eventually. But in this point, like he's just like kind of like long hair and he looks like a boy, basically, which he is. He's like 22, and like moving up in the army.
Yeah.
So he continues to be French. The revolution is over. Robespierre is dead, blah, blah, blah. He's 26 and he gets another promotion to Commander General of the Interior. And he lives in Paris and he's like very fancy. Now he has this fancy ass life in Paris. The revolution is over. They're trying to figure out the government and he has, money now. He can take care of his
Well, how did
family
he earn
in
his
Paris.
way into that?
He
Was
started
he
to do a
actually
bunch of like,
talented and good? And
yes, yes. The impression that I got from reading really fast and watching a documentary really fast is that he did things that other people wouldn't necessarily do. He would like run into battle. He was always with his troops in battle. He would surprise people in a way that they'd never been surprised before. And this is also like an interesting time in military history. Again, me knowing very little about military history, but like this is happening at the same time as the American Revolution. And do you remember learning about the American Revolution, how like George Washington would like sneak up on people in the middle of the night? That had never been done before. It was like Napoleon is like kind of the last wars that are like these formal wars where you have the fancy hat and you have like a guy with a drum, all those things. And you like announce that you're coming. And in a lot of spaces, you were supposed to just like my army and your army would
Walk to your
kind of
death.
walk towards each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then sometimes you would stop and you'd be like, "Okay, cool. I see that you have like, 10,000 more men than me. Why don't we call it and you can have this part of my country, you know?" But Napoleon like wouldn't stop. He would keep going.
Okay. So his talent
Kind of
was
fearless.
recklessness. And okay, fearlessness. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. He would like be persistent. He would go places where people like, didn't go. So now he wants to have a family. He's 26. He definitely is like, messing around with like, sex workers and all the things that you would do. But his first love is Josephine. So that's his big love that, would be the doomed to fail relationship if that's what we were talking about. Josephine's actually from Martinique, which is the island in the Caribbean that we have talked about before. And she's a widow. She has two kids. She's 32. He's, in his late 20s. She's deep in debt. So she needs to get married and have someone to help pay off all of her debt. She also is like a mistress to a couple of really high up people. And it sounds like maybe they wanted to kind of get rid of her or, have her take her off of their hands. So they get married. In the beginning, it's like about money. He doesn't have as much money as she thought that he did, but they end up being like pretty happy together. And it sounds like at some point they love each other,
Aw.
which is the best you can hope for, really.
That's all you can hope
These
for.
days and any day. Yeah.
Almost kind of sort of
So
liking your partner is like the best anybody can have.
100%. Yeah. Like you win. So Napoleon gets sent to the Alps to command the French army in Italy. And this is exciting because he is going to walk over the Alps like Hannibal did, 1,000 years ago. He's going to get to Austria, and people are kind of making fun of him at this point because they think that he got the job because kind of a trade-off for taking Josephine off of her ex's hands. But he does a good job. He's good at being in charge somehow.
Wait, hold on.
I don't know who, but
So the gift to like remove Josephine from like being a pain in the ass to everybody else was you get to walk
yeah,
across the Alps.
yep. Congratulations. But he wanted to do that, obviously.
Okay, all right, well,
The
good
rest
for
of
him.
us would be like, no,
Fuck
no,
that.
thank you. Can I stay in Paris, please? That'd be great. That'd be awesome. But someone said, another one of the generals said, that little bastard scares me, because he was so aggressive, even at this time. He wrote letters to Josephine, just telling her that he loved her, all those things. He won a bunch of battles there, and he was also really nice to the men, at least at this point. Like he would talk to everybody. He would say like, "Who's the bravest man here?" And he would like shake his hand, things like that. So the actual people doing the fighting, they liked him and they respected him because he respected them. They saw that he was like someone who came from nothing and like worked his way up, you know?
Doesn't it blow you away like how incredibly little it would take at certain junctures in history to like stand out from anybody else? Like
Hmm.
he was just he didn't cut your hands off if you looked at him the wrong way and they're like, this guy's a saint. Like we're gonna die for this guy. It's kind of wild.
Exactly. And it's wild. And, his actions have consequences. They're obviously like around the world, but so many millions of people died because of this, And even toward the end, there's people who are loyal to him and just like we don't know anything about them, All these people kind of lost in this story, but he stood out.
Do you remember how Joan of Arc became Joan of Arc?
I can't remember. Tell me again. By
She
like,
was like in a room in the castle, and she was like, I'm God's servant. I'm here like ordained by God. And the way I'm going to prove it to you is I'm going to tell you who in this room is the king. and she picked the king out in the room, and they're like, "Oh my God, you are here from God." Like it was,
I
it's
just
like really, like that's all it took. The guy with
I
the crown
imagine him
on.
like exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was like, I imagine a guy in the corner being like, tee hee 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 hee. She'll never guess it is I. And he's like wearing a crown. Exactly.
You'll never guess the guy with the velvet fucking droops on. Yeah, so
He's like
little.
eating a turkey leg and like
Yeah, just he's like
it's so
sitting on
funny.
a chair made of slaves. It's like
Who could it be? I don't know. Oh my God, that's so funny. Um,
ridiculous.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, this little dude stands out. And things that he did for his people in the army, like in they were living in the Alps, which is freezing, beautiful, but cold, and they hadn't been paid in years, so he would pay them. Things like that, that made people really loyal to him like immediately. And also this is where he's really doing that new fighting style where he keeps fighting past the game of chicken, and he's like chasing the Austrians across the Alps in a way that they did not
Like,
expect.
like this guy's
You know?
nuts. Like, he really wants to hurt
Yeah,
us.
like
He's not joking.
exactly, like exactly. Like he's coming at you. He's on his like little horse. And also, oh yeah, actually reminded me that this is where the famous painting of him like on the horse and the horse is like bucking up and he has his hat in the
Yeah.
air. Like this is from this area, but in real life he rode like a little donkey over the Alps.
Aw,
It is adorable.
that's so much cuter.
So so much cuter. Oh my goodness. So eventually Josephine goes to Italy. She doesn't really want to, but she does. She gets a palace and it's filled with flowers for her when she gets there. So then she's like, okay, like I'll spend more time with you, Napoleon, blah, blah, blah. He stole a lot of art from Italy and brought it back to Paris. And he put it in a museum that was called like Museum Napoleon for a long time. And now it's called the Louvre. So
Whoa.
he stole a bunch of stuff and put it there. And now he's part of the French government. Things are not going really well because they're trying to figure out their government now that they've like gotten rid of the monarchy. And the French government is called the Directory. They're trying to just figure out what's next. But Napoleon and Josephine are in Italy and they are trying to move east towards Austria, kind of into that area. But first, in 1798, they go to Egypt to start taking over in the top of Africa. So France is still at war with Britain. He's trying to disrupt the British cargo ships. He just trying to cause a lot of trouble down in Egypt. He captured Alexandria, then towards Cairo, which did you ever see? I hate to ask you questions about movies, but have you seen Patton with George C. Scott?
No.
You haven't. Okay,
No.
it's great. But there's a part in Patton where they're in North Africa and Patton and Rommel are going up against each other and they George C. Scott, who I also just adore, he's reading Patton's book, I'm sorry, he's reading Rommel's book about tanks and he's in a tank and so the first scene you see is that you see Patton, the American general, reading Rommel, the Nazi general's book about tanks. And then the next scene is he's in a tank going towards Rommel and he's yelling, "Damn it, Rommel, I read your book." It's amazing.
That's fun.
And so whenever I think of fighting in North Africa, I think of that, which is, simplifying it, but I always think of that. But they're in Egypt, and the Egyptians had been part of the Turkish Empire, and they had this is actually something that I want maybe should talk about later, but they had these Mamluk warriors who were these incredible warriors, but they couldn't keep up with Napoleon and his stuff. So there was a big battle in Cairo called the Battle of the Pyramids, and Napoleon won it in an hour. So he was here during a super exciting time in Egypt because when they got there, the Sphinx was buried up to its nose. So they were doing a lot of stuff like figuring out ancient Egyptian stuff and bringing that information west for the first time. Obviously, there was looting and stealing and all those things, but still, what an exciting time to be learning about Egypt.
Also, think about
You
how
know?
much cool shit someone's great 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 ancestor, some guy probably living in Arkansas right now might have the foot of the Sphinx as a bar stool.
Totally. Someone just brought home and they just had it in their family. I'm
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Lots of looting. Have you heard that joke? Why are the Great Pyramids in Egypt?
Mm-mm.
It's because they were too big to fit in the British Museum.
Yeah, makes sense. I get that.
Yeah. Um, okay. So Napoleon gets stuck in Egypt. So there's a great British general called Horatio Nelson, who I feel like is very famous in his own right. And he destroyed a lot of the French ships. So Napoleon got stuck in Egypt. So that's where they would just like check out Egyptian stuff, colonialism, all of that. Guess what else is people found in Egypt at this time?
Oh, mummies.
Probably, but they found the Rosetta Stone.
Wait, that's a real
That's a
thing?
big deal. The Rosetta Stone, yeah, it's the stone that translates Egyptian hieroglyphics into like other languages, so we finally knew what hieroglyphics meant.
I
I've seen
thought
it.
it was
It's
like,
in I think it's in the British Museum, honestly. I've seen it there.
wow, you're right. I thought this was like one of those like the Shroud of Turin, like a kind of historical
Yeah.
artifact, but it could also be fake.
No, I mean it's not magical, but
Oh my
it's
God, it
real.
is in the British Museum of London.
I have seen it then. I have seen it there. That's so funny. Funny, haha, you know. Um, so I also want to mention right now that I don't know Joaquin Phoenix personally, but can you just imagine how insufferable he must have been on the set of this movie?
I think he's insufferable
And just like
normally.
exactly. I just like can't wait. I think he's just like constantly method acting. I think it's supposed to have been like I just can't imagine. And I'm very excited to see this film that comes
He
out on
looks
Thursday.
like it does fit his personality. I will say, like, you couldn't really cast a better Napoleon.
Totally. Totally. So yeah, if you've seen it, anyone, let us know what you think about the movie. We'll see. I'll see it eventually, but I'm excited about it. So, okay. So eventually he gets out of Egypt and now he's going into Turkey and he's kind of failing as he tries to go up the Middle East. And also then the plague comes and a lot of his people die of the plague. And so he ends up going back through Egypt. And on October 9th, 1799, he gets back into France. And the propaganda in France is great for him. They're like, he's done all this cool shit in Egypt. He's fought the British. Like, people really like him. And they're really excited about having him back in France. And Josephine is like, I love this you know, like
Yeah.
I love this powerful little man now. He came back and we did all this cool shit in Egypt and now I'm really seeing the esteem that I feel like we deserve. And so they had a talk that was like we should stop having other lovers. And Josephine never had another lover, but Napoleon definitely did. Like a lot. He had a
How
couple children by
how
other
very
women.
how very noble of her to wait until he was a huge success.
100%. So, but now they're like together, I guess. And it is November 9th, 1799, and now it's time for a coup. So he wants to, be in charge now. So he goes into Paris, he has a sword, and he's trying to take over Parliament, and there's chaos. So he comes into the French Parliament with his sword. Everybody has a sword, which is where I want to pause and talk about. Have you seen all the people physically fighting in Congress these days, Faris?
I saw the senator from Oklahoma try to fight the UAW chair or
Oh
CEO,
my God.
and Bernie
Kevin
Sanders.
McCarthy punched. Wait, what did he do?
Bernie Sanders is the reason. Like Bernie Sanders. So apparently, like the senator from Oklahoma, like actually was like a former professional fighter, and the
Hmm.
UAW president was like talking shit about him and saying, "But next time I see him, I'm gonna bust your nose" and all that. And so this guy takes his jacket off, stands up, and was like, "Let's do it right here, right now." And then Bernie Sanders is like, "No, no, no, no! You are a senator. Sit down." It was awesome.
I feel like if anyone can have a sword it's gonna be Bernie Sanders. Let's give him a sword and nobody else.
I
I
don't
have to be
know.
okay with that.
You like a droopy sword. Maybe it's a butter knife.
We should give them all butter knives. Did Kevin McCarthy punch someone in the kidney?
Seriously?
Like in the hallway. Like sucker punched him in the kidney. So
I
funny.
love
I
it.
mean, these guys,
Love it.
these dickwads. So, but imagine that, but like more fun because everyone's dressed like Napoleon and everyone has a sword. And Napoleon's brother Lucien is like, he's not going to do anything. He doesn't have a sword, but that was not true because he is. And a whole bunch of stuff happens. And then when the coup is over, there's a new triumvirate in France, and Napoleon is one of them, obviously. And obviously, the triumvirate is like a Roman thing where three people are in charge.
Yeah, makes sense.
So,
Triumvirate.
yeah, yeah. So now he is, I guess he's back across in the Alps. He's still in the military, kind of going around. Technically, Europe is in peace. He's attacking Austria, still trying to get that land. He's 33 years old, and he makes himself first consul for life, which is like, of course, why wouldn't you just make that your job? And so he is kind of like the king. He's a triumvirate, but he's in charge. He's now in charge of France, and it looks like he finally cuts his hair off around this time, which is for the
Wait,
best.
he shaved
So
his
now
hair or cut it off?
he cuts it. Like after in the paintings of him, he doesn't have that long weird hair anymore.
Got it.
So he does a lot of like, trust me, I'm good at this. Like, come on, during this time. He does some stuff in France. There's, like liberty, equality, the things that the revolution was yelling. And he believes in equality, but not really in liberty. He wants it to be a meritocracy. Meritocracies are bullshit, of course. But he wants it to be a meritocracy. He's like, we all could be equal, but also I'm in charge, you know?
Right.
It's like you're not free, but you can do whatever you want. And he puts together a Napoleonic civil code, which is actually still in use in France, which is like about equality as its own thing. He's not very religious. He made Catholicism the main religion, but he didn't really care. He said religion is excellent stuff for keeping the common people quiet. He also said that religion is, um, this is not a direct quote, but religion, makes people think of heaven and ideas of equality, which saves the rich from being massacred by the poor, which is fair because,
Yeah, that's a good point.
you know. So liberty was not something he wanted, but equality, yes. And he's 34 now, but he wants to be a king. He wants to be more than just this, first consul for life. So on May 18th, 1804, Napoleon is crowned Emperor of France at the age of 35. He is crowned in Notre Dame, and he invited the Pope, but he didn't have the Pope crown him. He literally crowned himself. It's like a big ceremony, and he walks down the aisle, picks up the crown, and puts it on his own head, which I love.
35 is like, I know that people age faster back then, but that's kind of
It's
impressive.
young, man. No. Yeah, they didn't age that much faster, and to
Yeah.
have gotten there at 9, and then like, you know, he's, a little bit later, he's, the Emperor of France, which wasn't even a job until like that
He
day,
created it.
and then yeah. And so he made Josephine Empress, and all of his brothers and sisters got jobs. And also, do you remember when Notre Dame caught on fire a couple years
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah, but it was really sad.
And I remember, yeah, and I remember talking to someone who was like, it's just a building, but I'm like, it's not just a building.
I, I
It's a
think
big
I think
fucking
you were
deal.
I think you were talking to me.
Was it you? I mean, I remember, I know you didn't see this, but the movie Monuments Men from a long time ago with
You know
like,
what, Taylor? I actually did see that movie, damn it.
did you really?
I did.
Unbelievable.
It was
So
great.
I watched it on my way home from Italy when I was pregnant, and I cried the entire time because like that stuff's important, art is important, buildings are important. This is how we can visualize and see our history. And the fact that Napoleon crowned himself emperor in Notre Dame is a big fucking deal. And I'd be sad if it was gone.
Yeah, well, it's back. I think it's here.
I mean, it's fine.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to say after that I cannot express enough that he crowned himself. Just unbelievable.
Wait, so he literally picked the crown up and put it on his own head?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
It's amazing.
If you're the emperor, do whatever the fuck you want.
Exactly. So he's the emperor, Josephine's empress, they're in charge. And he's doing a ton of stuff with his army. He calls it the Grand Army, Le Grand Armée, and the army is going everywhere. So Austria and Russia have headed towards France to back up Britain. So he's fighting Austria, Russia, Prussia, Britain, and he's trying to move out from France. His army is, dressed really nice, and they walk 30 miles a day to like get to where they need to go to be able to like expand their, where their rule. And, nothing that Napoleon does is not on purpose. So he wears his hat so he stands out, but he wears the same outfits as everybody else to be like, I am still one of you. He's still there riding with them. He would go to sleep at 8 o'clock at night, sleep for a few hours, and then wake up and start working like in the middle of the night. So he was like constantly like just like he didn't sleep a lot. He treated himself the way that he treated them
Can I?
a lot of the time.
I'm gonna ask something that's probably gonna sound really dumb.
Let's see if I know the answer. I'm gonna try.
What was going on in world history? Like, is this just one of those things where like Britain and France, from time immemorial until the end of civilization, are always gonna just hate each other and be at war, or was this in terms of like expansion of the empire, or were they being like what was he
Yeah,
doing?
that's a good question. So it is, yes, Britain and France are always going to hate each other. I don't think they do right now, but like given the opportunity, they would definitely fight. It is the Enlightenment. I actually drew a timeline on my mirror in my office so I could like try to look at it. It's the Enlightenment and it's also the Revolution. So Napoleon lives at the same time as Catherine the Great, Marie Antoinette, George Washington. This is the time and other episodes that we've done. It's the time of the Acadians. It's time that, America starts and we have our first vice president. It's the time of Mutiny and the Bounty. It's at the very end of this time is like when Tambora erupts and the Shelleys and all this like art is happening, but it's a revolutionary time. This is when, the United States has just been formed. They're trying to figure out what to do with the rest of America. And we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit later, but, you know, there's westward expansion in America. So that revolution has inspired revolutions across Europe, including the French Revolution. Like Lafayette's around during this time. He's still around. So that's what's happening. It's people being like, we want to have our own like republics. We want to be more in charge. But by that, I mean like rich people want to be more in charge. They don't want to have a king anymore. So it's interesting that somehow Napoleon kind of makes himself a king pretty fucking quickly, you know?
I
But it's like
mean,
that. That's what's happening.
okay. I would assume that people are
That helps.
like who's gonna get in your way when you're like the most fearless like warrior and you're actually doing the fighting.
Yeah,
It's like Khal
totally. You're not
Drago,
gonna like run at him with a sword. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So he is moving towards Vienna. That's in Austria. There's some battles. Incidentally, Beethoven hates him, and he had dedicated a symphony to him and then crossed his name out because he did want to undedicate it to him, which is funny.
It's petty.
I have another joke. Do you want to hear a funny joke?
Yes.
Yes. So, I was actually in Austria recently, and I was helping a team exhume the body of Beethoven. And as we dug up his grave and opened up his casket, and he was in there, and he was just like a skeleton, and he had all of these papers, all this like, composition around him, and he was erasing it and erasing it and erasing it. And we said, Beethoven, what are you doing? And he said, I'm decomposing.
That's
That's
like,
it. That's
that's
the
pretty
joke.
good. That's pretty good. Did you come up with that
Thank you.
yourself, Taylor?
No, I feel like my dad told me that when I was very young, but it's still funny.
It works. It'll work forever.
So, thank you, thank you, thank you. So there's a whole bunch of battles that are going to happen in Napoleon's lifetime that you could write. I'm sure there's books about all of these, individually, but it's 1805. It's cold. It's going to be cold from now on in this story. There's a big battle. There's Battle of Austerlitz, which was, a huge famous battle that I will not get into, but he's victorious. And in this battle, 20,000 people died. It was terrible. And he wrote a letter to Josephine and was like, I'm a little tired. He's kind of his head's getting bigger
That makes
and bigger and
sense.
bigger.
I would.
So yeah, so he's in Berlin, he goes through Prussia, and all this time he's saying like liberty, equality is for everyone, but liberty is for the upper class, for the smart people. So he's in charge of who's in charge. And he still wants this like spirit of revolution. Like you just asked that question, like, a revolutionary spirit, but he's still in charge. He makes his family, have these roles that they're not qualified for. His brother Louis is a king of Holland. His brother Joseph is the king of Naples. His brother Jerome is the king of Westphalia, which is part of Prussia. And his sister Caroline is a queen. She's the one who discovered Pompeii. Not discovered it, but did a lot of the excavations in Pompeii that we talked about.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
His sister, remember? She like had them, She had them dig the outer wall of Pompeii to figure out how big it was before she was
That's
out of
right.
power, which is pretty cool. Yeah. His sister Pauline was a princess, his sister Alicia was a duchess, and he called his mom Madame Mère and kind of gave her whatever she wanted. There's a great painting of her with him as like a classical bust with like a laurel wreath on his head behind her. It's a lot. So, you know,
It's over
sure
the
she was
top.
proud of him. So meanwhile, he's, sleeping around. He has some mistresses, just, whatever. He's still married to Josephine, but Josephine is 46, and you know what she can't do?
Babies.
Babies. And you know what kind is particularly that he wants?
Probably a lot of girls, right?
Mm-hmm. No, he needs a boy.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
That's the
That's what
thing.
it was. That's the
Because
answer.
now he knows, I know. He wants it to be, now he wants his son to be the next emperor. Duh. Of course that was going to happen. So he so this is kind of like a meanwhile section that is, two paragraphs that, millions of people died during these two paragraphs, but he goes to Russia, you know what I mean. And he meets the Tsar Alexander, who's the grandson of Catherine the Great, and he like loves him. He's like, let's be friends, let's fight the English. There's like a painting of them like hugging. He wrote to someone, if Alexander were a woman, I'd make him my mistress, which I think is also like
That's weird.
people, yeah, but I think he might have also meant like I could control this guy in 2 seconds, like he's not someone that I'm really worried about.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's not how I interpreted it, but
Well, yeah, other people, well, there's also a drawing of them like saying, which they didn't like make out, but
right,
whatever.
right.
So he's trying to get parts of Russia, get Russia to be on his side. He definitely wants to fight Britain. And meanwhile, there's stuff happening in other parts of the world. Like I just said, in the US, there's westward expansion, there's a Louisiana Purchase, there's stuff happening with Spain and Mexico and parts of California. There's stuff happening in New Zealand. New Zealand is worried that Napoleon's coming for them, but he's like, I literally don't care. I'm not coming there. But there's a lot of
Poor
like
New Zealand.
British thing happening. Yeah. But in New Zealand at this time is also the Rum Rebellion, which is where Captain Bligh from the Mutiny on the Bounty had his second mutiny, and he had
Whoa.
to go back to England because he was a terrible leader. There's also Spain. So he imagines he's going to go into Spain and be like, liberty, woohoo, free us from superstition, let's go. And the Spanish were like, no, we don't want any of that. And so the Spanish people, along with the army, really fought Napoleon's army. There's a really famous painting by Goya called The 3rd of May, 1808, that has Napoleon's troops killing a man, just like a farmer. And it really shows the, kind of like the terror of regular people getting killed by these troops. So that was a big deal. During this time, the Spanish, what they were doing was the first time anyone was doing guerrilla warfare against a big army, which
Taylor,
is this is where that term started.
I'm gonna cut you off for a second. There's gonna be
Please
some
do.
synchronicities in our stories, and the more you talk, the more I'm like,
Ugh.
damn, we have like we're getting like a little bit overlappy, but we'll get to it.
I was a smidge worried that you were going to do Napoleon because I was like, we have to do Napoleon this week because of the movie coming out, but at least you didn't do that.
I didn't do that, but there's some
Um,
synchronicity.
okay, so anyway, guerrilla war, Spain. Napoleon's like, fuck you guys, I'm gonna do it myself. He thinks he can do no wrong at this point. Like, imagine now he's a little tiny body with a huge head, with a crown on it.
Oh,
And he divorces Josephine at this time because he needs to have that son. One of the ways that she found out that they were divorced is they had, you know how like in this time you have like your rooms and your wife has her rooms and you see each other once in a while at night.
right.
He bricked up the door between their rooms. And she's like, I guess he
Seriously?
doesn't love me anymore. I guess we're divorced.
God, that's awesome. That's like when people find out they got fired because they can't log into their email.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. And it's so terrible, but I'm imagining like in the middle of the night, she like opens the door and like bangs into the brick and is like, fuck.
Shit, it finally
Don't know.
happened.
But he loved her and he's like he has to have a boy. This time it sounds like they love each other. And I mean he didn't kill her. That's good.
But he didn't
At least he
kill
didn't kill her.
he didn't kill any of his partners.
No. Mm-mm. He visited her at like a palace and they held hands and he told her how much he cared for her and then they never saw each other again. So it was like she was sad. He ended up marrying a woman named Marie Louise. She was the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. She didn't really want to marry him, but her dad was like, "Come on, like this guy's in charge of France now. You should marry him." They were Habsburgs, which is like, obviously a big deal. And honestly, like I feel like marrying Napoleon is pretty great because at least you get some new blood in that line,
Probably.
you know?
Yeah. Less inbreeding.
At least they're not related as far as
Yeah.
Habsburgs go. But eventually she actually does really like him. And they have a baby. It's like Napoleon II. Napoleon calls him the King of Rome. He will have like a painting of the baby with him in battles and show people and be like, look at how exciting this is. And they're kind of like, we're in the middle of something, boss, but he still wants
Like,
people, he's still just very excited. So a lot of stuff is happening in Europe. I wrote lots of economy stuff, so you're welcome for that. Lots of other shit's happening. But in the meantime, it's 1812, and Napoleon wants to go to Russia. And what's the
oof,
one main
oof.
thing we know about Russia?
Can't be defeated. You can't invade Russia.
Yeah, no, because it's fucking cold as shit, and you cannot get there. You cannot walk into Russia. It's impossible. And the people they fight back more than the Spanish, more than he ever imagined they would. People in Russia, like they leave Moscow. When he gets to Moscow finally, after fighting peasants and people who have burned down their own farms and killed their own animals so the French can't have them, he gets to Moscow and it's like weirdly quiet. And he's like, "What's going on?" And someone goes in and they're like, "It's empty. There's no one here." People just abandoned Moscow and they started burning it down on their way out. It was made of wood, like, this happens in War and Peace where, they just let Moscow burn. And so they get there and they're like, well, we have to leave because the city's on fire. And they probably could have stayed actually and like been okay, but they leave because they're afraid because it's on fire. So first, though, they plunder every fucking thing they can. So there's these people who have these stories of like, going to a square in Moscow and there's a fire, but in the fire are these like beautiful Russian sofas and doors and statues and carvings, and the men are covered in like beautiful draperies that are like, hundreds of years old and all these things because they're just like pillaging and trying to bring home as much as they can as well. So they're like, trading for like gold for jackets and they're drinking all the good liquor and like, all the things that you do when you like plunder a town.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, of course they do. And they're starting to, so they have to leave though because it's on fire. So they start walking home. Winter arrives early. It gets to like 22 degrees below zero, just like unbelievable cold. And they're walking and they're like, kind of covered in tapestries, but like walking. And as you walked, you would see like mounds of snow where people had just fallen and died and just been buried by the snow. And they're eating their horses. And in both the book and the documentary I watched, they call horse meat horse flesh, which like feels
Ugh.
worse.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And they're still being attacked by like peasants and people on their way out. And he on December 5th, Napoleon has to go back faster to France, so he kind of abandons his troops and goes back on like a sled to get there faster. He told someone at all times he's one step between the sublime and the ridiculous. So this didn't work. Took 600,000 men to Russia and 93,000 came back. So
Yeah.
a lot of people died. Um, Also, there's a Dan Carlin on called Ghosts of the Ostfront about when the Nazis tried to do this. You can't do it. You can't,
I
don't walk
mean,
into Russia.
I will give Hitler some. I mean, the guy had balls. He was fighting a two-front war, and one of those fronts was to invade Russia, which is insane.
Yeah. Which is what Napoleon is trying to do. And he just like can't do it. So now
Yeah.
even Austria is mad at Napoleon. Everyone's mad because, a lot of people are dying. It's just been a war for like 20 years. And his Austria fights him, which he's surprised by because the Austrian king is his father-in-law, but still Austria's like, no, you can't keep doing this. He says goodbye to his family and he says, don't worry, like everything's gonna be okay. Grandpa's gonna get over this, to his son, and he separates from his family. And he goes back into Paris on March 22nd, 1814, and Paris is actually taken back by like a new group of revolutionaries, and they want Napoleon gone, and he renounces his throne on April 12th, 1814. His wife wanted to see him, but she never would see him again. I think she went back to Austria. They don't see each other again. They say that he tried to die by suicide, but it didn't work. Like he poured powder into his mouth, but whatever that was, it didn't kill him. And he still has like some loyal soldiers with their white pants and their big hats, and they go with him to Elba, where he's exiled. Remember this?
No.
So remember
I would.
how Nero's mom was exiled? Just the whole point
Oh.
is like being exiled is sounds really nice for these guys. It's not like he was put into prison. There was a beautiful villa on this beautiful island that is between Corsica and Italy. So it's in this beautiful part of the world. And there's 13,000 peasants who live on the island. I feel like when I heard he was exiled to an island, I imagined him like Napoleon and palm tree, you know?
I
But
always pictured
there's a lot of
like
people there.
that movie Papillon, where the exiling is like a crazy mountainous region that is impossible to escape and has no resources.
I don't think I've seen that, but that's what I picture as well.
It's Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen and
You,
Dustin Hoffman are in it.
oh,
A
interesting.
very, very young Dustin
Yeah,
Hoffman.
yeah, I bet. But yeah, exactly. You imagine exile is rough, but this doesn't sound rough. He still
No.
has supporters. He still has some like army guys. There's 13,000 people living there. So he makes himself the emperor of the Isle of Elba and kind of takes
I love
charge of all the people
this.
living there. Of course he does. He actually does some good stuff. He builds roads. He schedules garbage pickup around the island, kind of cleans it up, gives the people some structure. He tells them that they have to stop sleeping more than five people in a bed because they're like peasants. They're poor. It's like a ridiculous place. And he just like tries to modernize it a little bit. And while he's there, Josephine dies. So he mourns her. He hears that she dies. I don't even know how she dies, but she dies. And meanwhile, in France, King Louis the 18th is the king again. He's the brother of the dead one. And also, I know I told you this, but a reminder that Alexander in Russia was Catherine the Great's grandson. So a lot of people that we know who are related to other people we've talked about this time. But in 1818, Napoleon sneaks out of Elba. He's bored. He has a lot of people with him, and so they just like get a boat somehow. And by the time they get to Paris, like they don't even have any, they don't know that he's there. They like hear that he left Elba. By the time they hear that, he's already in Paris, and he comes back. And Louis the 18th flees Paris because he's like, oh shit, I gotta get out of here because this little guy's coming for me. And it's easy, relatively easy for Napoleon to come back and be in charge again because things are crazy. Britain, Russia, and Prussia are fighting the French. Louis the 18th is not a very strong monarch, so he's doing all of these. It's easy for him to come back and be like, I'm in charge again now,
Taylor, have you seen
you know?
pictures of Elba?
Yes. Isn't it beautiful?
It is gorgeous.
Put me there. Lock me up.
Like,
Give
just
me some books.
give me a knife and like some like matches and leave me there. I'll be fine.
Yeah, 100%. It's so nice. But he is back in Paris, back in charge. Now he has more armies. And then he does one of his big, in 1818, one of his big famous battles is the Battle of Waterloo. And that's the waterslide one from Bill and Ted.
Right.
The Duke of Wellington is waiting for him. So the Duke of Wellington, it's against France and Prussia and Russia. The Duke of Wellington is waiting for Napoleon. In the PBS documentary, a very, very British man, like one of the most British people you could possibly imagine, says the Duke of Wellington is like impossibly British. It's pretty funny. He's like boring and pompous and tall. And like, so imagine an impossibly British person calling someone impossibly British. That's how British the Duke of Wellington is. And the Battle of Waterloo is on June 18th, 1818. It's sunny, but it rained all day the day before, so it's like wet. There's like puddles and everyone is wet. Napoleon didn't attack in the morning. He waited until the afternoon. And there's a bunch of people trying to figure out why, like what was his strategy? Was he waiting for it to get dry. Like the British troops and all the other troops are waiting for him to attack. They're expecting him to, and he doesn't for a while. And so this is where I want to mention my friend Dan Carlin. He has an episode that is History Under the Influence, which is times when world leaders were probably really fucked up on like drugs and or alcohol
Wait, this
and
is a
made decisions
podcast?
that yeah, it's called History Under the Influence. You can buy it on his website and then like download it. It's not like available. It's like $2. You have to buy it on his website. But he talks about things like, how Hitler was on meth the whole time, which explains a lot of his like super erratic behavior. How JFK was on so many pain pills, also on amphetamines, that, sometimes JFK would work from bed all day because he was in so much pain. And how like during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was pretty fucked up. And we're pretty lucky that we're not all dead, you
We
know?
made it. Yeah.
And so the big one in that podcast is Alexander the Great does a bunch of crazy things, but he probably because he was like a raging alcoholic and was probably drunk a lot of the time. Same with Winston Churchill. But in this, in Dan's research for this, he read something that suggests that the night before the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon took a dose of opium to be able to fall asleep, and he wasn't able to wake up, and he was still like really foggy in the morning. So he potentially could have won this battle if he had been sharper and been like up earlier, but he wasn't, maybe because he took some drugs the night before,
Well,
which is interesting.
yeah.
So Napoleon had his like Napoleonic Guard, who were like the people who were like the strongest and the bravest of all of his men, and they went out and fought against the Russians and the Prussians and the British, and they ended up retreating, and the Guard did, which like made everybody scared because they're like, we can't believe the Guard is retreating, so everybody kind of ran away, and they lost that battle, but it was by a hair. The Duke of Wellington was like, I cannot believe that we won. So if Napoleon had been sharper, he definitely would have won.
Really fucked up.
So now he abdicates his throne again. He's like, okay, how about I go to London? And they're like, absolutely not. Are you out of your mind? Like, why on earth would Britain take you? So they send him to another island called St. Helena, which is like a fortress with very few people. And that's where he ends up being. He was only 46 the second time he was exiled.
I mean, on the
Isn't that
second
crazy?
time you get exiled, like, you should have stayed in
And this one
Elba.
stuck. I know. It would have been nice. He could have lived to be like really old. But one question that I have that I put to the internet that I didn't really get a satisfying answer for is like, why didn't they just kill him? You know?
Uh, Usually
And
in those situations, it's because the support of the lower classes of the person is so high that killing him would cause either an uprising or martyr him
yeah,
or something along those lines.
that's true. I think it would have murdered him. That makes sense because I'm like, they just killed King Louis the 16th, but I guess
Nobody wanted
that
him.
was the lower class, right? The lower classes were like, we also want him dead.
Yeah, fuck this guy.
That makes sense. Yeah. So while he was on St. Helena, he wrote his autobiography. He wrote a book about Julius Caesar, of course. He just like hung out. He died at the age of 51 in 1821. He died of probably like stomach cancer. When they opened him up to do an autopsy, his stomach was full of like tumors and things. So they think that is what ended up killing him. He whispered, as he was dying, he whispered, France, Army, Josephine on his
Aw.
deathbed, were his last words. And he said, there's no immortality but the memory that is left in the minds of men, which is true because we were talking about him and
Right.
this big movie is about to come out. So his body was brought back to Paris and taken through the streets. And it said that even then people were yelling, Viva l'Empereur, as his body got taken through the streets. So he still had people who were loyal to him
Yeah, that's why they didn't
through
kill
the
him.
end. Yeah, totally makes sense. And so yeah, so that's it. I you know did the smallest amount of research humanly possible to do this, and that was still a lot of research, and people dedicate lives to this. So I'm looking forward to seeing the movie to learning a little bit more because I want to learn more about like the person that he was and a lot of the why. Like he was very motivated, but like ultra motivated. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
like a normal person, like crazy, which is why we know about him and
He
why
could
we
have
keep talking
taken
about him. So yeah.
a chill pill.
Could have taken a chill pill.
That's interesting. I'm definitely gonna see the movie. It is one of those. I love those period pieces. It's like Gladiator and all them, which also had Joaquin Phoenix in
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
those are always really fascinating. What is hard to kind of decipher though is like the editing part of it, of like how do you choose a section of someone's life to cover? Because like if you were
Yeah,
to
yeah, good question.
cover the whole thing, if you're like, here's Napoleon's biography, it's like, okay, well, we don't have 37 hours to watch a biopic like that. So how do you take someone who's done so many crazy things and condense their life in like 2 hours, you know?
Absolutely. And you know what? Actually, that reminds me, I didn't watch this, but my friend Karen recommended, and our friend Wes found on the internet a movie from the 1920s, a silent film about Napoleon that's 7 hours long.
Yeah, it tracks. I
That's
mean,
it's supposed to be amazing. Like, I don't have 7 hours to watch it, but I definitely want to watch some of it. But Karen said she was like, I was enthralled in like the 7 hours of the silent movie. So like to your point, like we need more time to talk about this person. There's more in there.
that feels like a do nothing Sunday activity.
Absolutely. Oh, doesn't that sound
Um,
nice? I wish I had one of those.
yeah, yeah, I feel you. Sweet. Well, thanks for sharing, Taylor. We are gonna
You're
await
welcome.
with bated breath the release of the Napoleon movie. Um, and that's a perfect thing to do if you want to get away from your family during the Thanksgiving holidays. Napoleon comes out on Wednesday. On Thursday afternoon, be like, I'm done. I'm done with socializing. I'm done with hearing Uncle Bill's theories on politics. Let's go see a movie.
Exactly. That's a great idea. It's a
There you
great
go.
Thanksgiving activity. I love it.
Yes. Yes.
I
Sweet.
love it.
Is there anything
Cool.
else we need to discuss before we close this out and rejoin on Wednesday?
Yeah, I put all of our merch on sale. It's
Woo!
25% off to now through November 28th. So
We are
FYI,
we are
now's
gonna
the
be
time. If you want to buy someone a Doom to Film mug or a t-shirt for the holidays, let's do it.
we are gonna be millionaires.
Can't wait.
I can't wait either.
Can't
Please go
wait.
buy something, or you know what? Even if you don't buy something, just tell someone to listen to this podcast. Like grab their phone. If you have a significant other, grab their phone, subscribe them to the podcast, and we would just as much appreciate that.
Please do. We'd love it. Find us on the internet at Doom to Fail Pod on all of the social medias and send us an email, doomtofailpod@gmail.com, which reminds me, Fars, I found a volcanologist to talk to.
No.
So I was like, okay, who do I know? So I went on LinkedIn and I know someone who worked with my brother-in-law, and he's like, we're actually really close. And he went to school for being a volcanologist. And also, my brother-in-law does not listen to this, which is why he doesn't know I was looking for a volcanologist. But I'm gonna ask him some questions, and I'm really excited. So I have that
That
coming too.
is that is incredible.
So if you have a question for volcanologists, everyone, send us an email, and we'll relay it to the one that we meet. And it's
How
gonna be fun. I'm
do
excited.
volcanoes work? No, we already learned
That's not our
that.
question.
Yeah, right, right.
That'd be hilarious. Tell me, what is a volcano?
What is a volcano?
Oh my God, it's so
Sweet.
funny. It'd be
Looking forward to
hilarious.
that,
But cool.
Taylor. Thanks for sharing this one. And yeah, I'll go ahead and cut this off and rejoin everyone on Wednesday.
Also, wait, let me yell one more thing. Avec, waterslide. Triomphe, Napoleon. Okay, thank you.
Bye, all.